Two officers stopped a man on a quiet street, accusing him of a crime he didn't commit. Little did they know, the man they were targeting held a powerful position, one that could expose their actions in a broken system. What followed changed everything. But to understand, we need to start from the beginning. Michael Carter, a tall man in his early 40s, wore a sharp gray suit as he walked through the silent streets of Willow Ridge. It was late at night, and the soft glow of streetlights barely touched the empty sidewalks. Michael was heading home after a long day working on a major legal case. His briefcase felt heavier than usual, though it was just packed with important legal documents. His mind was consumed with plans and strategies for the courtroom. As Michael turned onto a dimly lit road, the bright flash of red and blue lights broke the calm. He paused, raising his hands slightly out of habit to signal he wasn't a threat. A patrol car rolled up next to him, and two officers stepped out. "Out a bit late, aren't you?" said Officer Blake, a stocky man with a hard-edged grin that didn't reach his eyes. Michael stayed calm, his voice steady. "I'm heading home. Is there a problem?" Blake nodded toward his partner, a younger officer named Harris, who seemed less sure of himself. "We got a report of a break-in nearby," Blake said, his tone sharp. "You match the description." Michael frowned slightly. "I think there's been a mistake. I'm a lawyer, coming from my office downtown." Blake chuckled coldly. "Oh, lawyer, huh? What's in the briefcase? Something you shouldn't have?" Harris looked uncomfortable, but stayed silent as Blake moved closer, gesturing toward the briefcase. "It's full of legal documents," Michael said firmly. "You're welcome to check if you don't believe me." Without waiting for permission, Blake grabbed the briefcase and opened it, sifting through the papers inside. His smirk grew. Well, someone's really going all out to look innocent." Michael's patience was wearing thin. "This is harassment," he said. "I haven't done anything wrong, and you have no reason to stop me." Blake stepped closer, his face tight with irritation. "We don't need a reason. Hands behind your back." "For what?" Michael asked, his voice sharp now. "You don't have evidence." Blake grabbed Michael's arm roughly, snapping handcuffs on his wrists. "Resisting an officer," he said with a sneer. "Let's start with that and see where it goes." Harris looked uneasy but still reached for his radio. "Dispatch," he said, his voice low. "We've got someone in custody." Michael was pushed into the back of the patrol car, anger simmering in his chest. He didn't resist, but his mind raced with thoughts of what he would do next. This wasn't going to end the way the officers thought. At the station, Michael was taken to a stark, brightly lit processing room. The air smelled of cleaning chemicals, and the dull noise of ringing phones filled the background. Blake took charge, emptying Michael's pockets and placing his belongings on a counter, his wallet, phone, and the briefcase that had already been rifled through. Each item was cataloged hastily, as if Michael's guilt was already decided. Blake worked on his report, spinning a story to justify his actions. Charges were written: breaking and entering, resisting arrest, and possession of stolen property. Each accusation was as false as it was damning. Harris stood by the door, arms crossed, his expression tight with unease. He didn't agree with what was happening, but he kept his thoughts to himself. Silence was safer, even if it wasn't right. In the cold, bare cell where Michael was placed, he sat on a hard bench bolted to the wall. He leaned forward, his hands clasped together, staring at the floor as anger churned inside him. Through the steel bars, he could hear Blake laughing with another officer, bragging about the arrest. Michael stayed quiet, but his resolve only grew stronger. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "One more troublemaker off the streets," Blake said with a laugh. "Can't wait to see his face when the judge hits him with the harshest sentence." Michael's fists clenched tightly. The man who had spent his career fighting inequality was now a victim of it. His heart raced, not with fear, but with a fierce determination. He wasn't going to let this go unanswered. The following morning, Michael used his one phone call to contact his legal team. By midday, his assistant Lauren arrived at the station, carrying a stack of evidence that not only debunked the charges, but also suggested Blake's questionable practices. Within hours, Michael was released. Though his freedom was restored, his mission had only just begun. Walking out of the station, Michael's resolve was unshakable. He would expose the corruption that had tried to silence him. A week later, the courtroom was alive with tension. Every seat was filled. Spectators, journalists, and legal experts gathered to witness what was being called the trial of the year. At the prosecution's table, Officer Blake sat with an air of arrogance, his confidence unshaken. Next to him, Officer Harris looked visibly uneasy, avoiding eye contact with anyone in the room. Representing the prosecution was Margaret Klein, a well-known district attorney with a reputation for being relentless in court. She skimmed her notes with precision, her expression calm and calculating. Michael entered the courtroom with an air of quiet authority. His tailored black suit and steady gaze commanded respect. He approached the defense table and set his briefcase down with a calmness that seemed to rattle his opponents. The room fell silent as the judge entered and called for order. As the trial began, Michael stood, his voice calm yet firm. "Your Honor," he announced, "I will be representing myself." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Blake's smug expression flickered with uncertainty, while Klein shot a sharp glance at Michael, her composure momentarily shaken. This was a move she hadn't anticipated. What followed was nothing short of a masterclass in legal strategy. Michael began by presenting a video recording from a security camera near a convenience store, timestamped to show he was nowhere near the reported crime scene. The video was clear, leaving no room for argument. Next, Michael introduced a recording from the officer's patrol car. The courtroom grew silent as Blake's voice played over the speakers. His mocking tone filled the air as he casually admitted there was no real suspect and suggested they make it work. Klein objected repeatedly, but the judge overruled her each time. The evidence was undeniable. Then Michael turned his attention to Officer Harris, calling him to the stand. Harris hesitated as he was sworn in, his hands shaking slightly. Under Michael's pointed but calm questioning, Harris finally broke down. "It wasn't right," Harris confessed, his voice trembling. "There was no real suspect. Officer Blake told me to go along with it, to make it look like we had a case." The room erupted in murmurs of shock. Blake jumped up, shouting, "That's a lie." But his outburst only made things worse. The facade had crumbled. Klein quickly requested a recess, but Michael wasn't finished. Rising to his feet, he addressed the judge once more. "Your Honor, before we take a break, I'd like to submit one final piece of evidence." He walked to the bench and handed over a file, then turned to the courtroom. "This is my resume," he said, his voice steady but commanding. "Before these officers falsely accused me, before they fabricated charges, I was preparing for an important case. You see, I'm not just a lawyer. I am the state's chief prosecutor." The courtroom fell silent. Gasps echoed as realization dawned on everyone present. "And I will not tolerate corruption," Michael continued, his voice growing louder. "Not in my courtroom, not in this state, and not from those who have sworn to uphold the law." Blake's face went pale, his confidence shattered. Klein lowered her gaze, unable to meet Michael's eyes. The judge quickly dismissed all charges against Michael, but the fallout didn't end there. Michael filed a formal complaint against Blake, prompting a deep investigation into the officer's actions. It wasn't long before Blake's misconduct was exposed, leading to his dismissal from the force. Harris, though involved, cooperated fully with the investigation, earning a second chance under strict probation. Weeks later, Michael stood before a crowd of reporters outside the courthouse. Cameras flashed as he spoke into the microphone. "This case was never just about me," he said firmly. "It's about a system that allows injustice to thrive unchecked. But we have the power to change it together." The crowd broke into applause, their cheers echoing through the streets. Michael stepped back from the podium, his work far from over, but his resolve stronger than ever.